Let's debunk Aron Ra, shall we? We'll get into the phylogeny challenge here in a moment, but let's start out with how Aron Ra began his online venture, promoting atheism and attacking Christianity from the very beginning. It's been his goal since the start, from over 12 years ago. His first video, which has now 32,000 views, states with the title that God is not interested in technology. It's even the name of one of his first videos. Since that time, he has refined his debates to specifically target certain aspects of evolution and targeting specific topics of creation. He hunts for scientific support to push his agenda, thinking that somehow, if he can prove God doesn't exist, then it'll prove evolution to be true. He knows that his only option, if evolution is wrong, is that special creation is right. Aron Ra states many outlandish things, so let's start with what he has said about man being formed out of some form of magic. That makes them somehow genetically or something different if they were truly created by God. Like somehow man needs to be made of some invisible internal magic to be made in God's image. He somehow imposes some mystical process that invokes his imagination of how he thinks God created man, and then says we need to prove him wrong. That's not how this works, buddy. That's a negative claim. It is an insinuation that God made man out of magic, so the burden of proof is actually on you. Besides, if Aron cannot tell himself that humans are far different than every other animal just by visually looking at them, then he has some mental problems that no one can help. He simply looks at comparative anatomy, listens to taxonomy lectures, and looks at examples of clayed lines on paper to determine where humans should fit in, like most evolutionists do. He hates the Bible so much that he must prove it wrong. He quotes, "Humans are a product of common ancestry, not involvement of an evident designer. Yet here we are, humans, vastly different than any known animal or species in every way." While I would like to think and believe that Aron is coming from a place of stupidity, there are some arguments he puts forward that cause me to think it's acting in malice. In reality, it's both. His last video, called "Teach the Real Controversy," he had made a statement about evolution that it's both a fact and a theory. Wow. One doesn't have to get much dumber than that. But hey, he's a used car salesman trying to sell you his belief system. He will stoop to any level to make that happen, and to make others believe it. He is the exact opposite of a theist, trying to convert somebody. Unfortunately, his system leads the world in suicide rates, depression, medication intake, and school shootings. So basically, the phylogeny challenge is actually a hypothesis regarding the evolutionary descent of all life on Earth from a common ancestor, and that, to demonstrate the truth of this hypothesis, evolutionists must falsify the counter-hypothesis that we live in a created, designed universe. Therefore, the actual problem with the phylogeny challenge is misdirected at creationists. It should actually be directed at evolutionists, because it's their phylogenetic tree and their hypothesis. Cladistics was developed by and for evolutionists. It still fails to demonstrate evolution, let alone the biological reality that Aron Ra tries to use it for. Evolution is still typically seen as the theoretical justification for using cladistics and paleontology, so the conclusion of evolution merely begs the question. Cladograms only demonstrate a nested hierarchy of biological characters. They tell us nothing about what produced the pattern. Evolutionary cladistics also depicts a simplistic view of biological change and fails to deal with pleiotropy within organisms. These problems were even recognized by evolutionists over 30 years ago, but their criticisms largely fell on deaf ears. Cladistics only acknowledges changes that arise due to a branching pattern, cladiogenesis, and thus homogenizes different types of morphological disparity, producing a biologically unrealistic situation. Ironically, this makes phyletic gradualists like Ernest Mayr, who coined the term cladistics, unwitting allies with us, creationists, because we too acknowledge different types of morphological disparity. The difference, of course, is that, in spite of the evidence, Mayr is convinced that large-scale morphological discontinuity can be bridged naturalistically, as we creationists are not. Nevertheless, this inability to differentiate between different types of biological disparity renders cladistics inadequate for recounting the history of biology. So in regard to evolutionist phylogenetic trees and cladistics, Aron acknowledges what they have said, that they would violate their proposition at the points where they said that they would clip branches from your tree to plant different trees in their orchard, since Aron is accurately reporting what they said, and has previously mentioned that the problem creationists have is that some, if not all, their clippings lead to a nested kind, i.e. kinds within kinds, which is why he believes we creationists can't answer the phylogeny challenge. But according to their own statements, including Aron's, they would violate their own proposition, where they said that their various branches of the phylogenetic tree are actually different trees in their orchard. So, looking at this, which they have done in the past and said that they would do again, they can, will, and would separate two of their or more of their nested kinds into two or more separate trees in their orchard if they wanted, at which point he would cry bloody foul because they, the evolutionary scientists themselves, would have failed his challenge. To which the creationist would rightly respond, I was never bound to maintain your hypothetical relationships because your tree is constructed based on a fundamental proposition which I reject. Thus, the phylogeny challenge is only valid according to your terms. Because they've all described a division, they should be able to identify within the cladistic taxonomy, but we all know that these tree branches change all the time because inevitably if a scientist by using comparative anatomy puts something in one branch, it won't take long before a taxonomist moves it to another. Aron Ra, your own challenge has rules that don't need to be followed. How is that a logical competition at all? It is not, because you can break and change your own rules at any time. This is Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge, and everything he has done and said only reinforce this understanding by everything he has said verbally on camera and in writing. He will allow creationists to clip individual branches from your phylogenetic tree and plant them and these branches into their orchard, but if any particular clipping leads to a tree containing a nested kind, and the creationist attempts to clip this nesting off onto a new tree, or attempts to graft a twig from somewhere else onto this tree, or into a particular orchard, you will scream foul. Then claim that they have failed the challenge, like he did when Kent Hovind and Ken Ham, who were on public record as stating that they would not make any further clippings on a newly planted orchard tree beyond the clippings they made to separate the branch from your tree. I see right through your hypocritical scam challenge. Besides, if Aron took a look at the fossil record in depth, he would notice a lack of dead branches one would expect to find if creationism were true. The fossil record simply shows that individual species came out of nowhere all at once, and that species have gone extinct. That's right, all 32 mammal orders appear abruptly and fully formed in the fossil record. If you want, stay tuned at the end, and I will show you complete stasis in the fossil record. What Aron Ra doesn't tell you is that molecular phylogenetics focuses on model-based analysis, where variation in the data are measured against predictions of other models of sequence evolution. As you can see, it's model-building presumption using other model-based assumption, nothing more. Also regarding phylogeny, Aron tries to prove that all life is connected by showing that any two organisms are related because it is a simple matter of testing the nuclear DNA of the nucleus for paternity and the mtDNA in cells for maternity, then looking for synonymous neutral variants and markers of the genome codon for codon. What they don't have is the ability to see past their own bias, nor the logic to comprehend and see the obvious, and that how few variations there are internally, and that they should expect to see the same amino acids and gene in all life. But this means nothing. There is nothing special about seeing similarities in life when all life has a handful of requirements compared to the huge variety of all life that exists. How many different genetic similarities does one really expect out of all life on Earth? Of course it's going to have some similar patterns. It's absurd to think that it won't. There are almost as many varieties of moths as there are genes to diversify them. It's like saying I want to build a tree to show the common ancestry of all coins. I have a pocket full of change, so I come up with a hypothesis and conclude that anyone who has similar coins in their pocket are probably related. So I go ask my friends to show me the change in their pockets. I see some exactly like me, but others have different amounts in theirs, and some none at all. I conclude then that those who have the closest amount of change in their pockets are probably more related to me than those that don't. But why? Those coins can be in anybody's pockets, totally unrelated, or even found on the ground. So am I related to cement or carpet? No. How about a fountain? People throw coins in fountains all the time to make wishes. So rather than conclude the obvious that all coins can just be in people's pockets because they are required in life, I just presume that anyone with coins in their pocket are related because of it. This is what the evolutionists have done by trying to match a small number of basic requirements for life to exist and then calling it relation. Sure, it's related in the fact that genes and amino acids are required. To make anything more of it out of it than that is trying to make my theory about coins into the next scientific theory. This is what evolutionists have done by trying to match a small number of total genes and amino acids to a world that has over 7.7 million species of animals, 298,000 species of plants, 900,000 insects. So what would you expect in some similar patterns in different species of the 19,000 total genes and almost 10 million species of life on Earth? I would hope so. The creationist would say common designer, evolutionists say common ancestor, but in reality, the small amount of variation option should be seen throughout all life because it's obvious. The amount of variety doesn't have a choice, but to share a common basic required theme. So evolutionists try to make their case stronger by combining homology, taxonomy, genes, and anything they can to add strength to their illogical, false dichotomy fallacy that it is. It's like going back to my coin theory. I now have a link to prove connection. Now, to strengthen the theory, I say that all coins found in pockets show a branch. Coins found on the street are a different branch. Coins found in water are yet another. But all are tracked back to a common ancestor because I assume all coins are related because they're all round. Sorry, that's all wrong. All coins have a maker. But now I need to strengthen my coin theory, so I want to go a step further and find out which coin is older. First, I notice that pennies are everywhere, far outnumbering any other coin. They're also just a single cent, so I assume that this is the most simple coin of them all. When I go looking, I notice that most coins of them are found in fountains, so I assume that this first came based on their simplicity that they must have originated in water. Dimes I see, but they're kind of rare. Nickels, however, I find everywhere on the ground, usually alone, and they're often filthy. People don't even bother picking them up because their value isn't even worth the filth that they're in. So I assume that this coin was next to evolve because of its abundance, as well as the filth that they're in and scattered everywhere. Quarters, however, I hardly ever find on the ground, but I do find them in people's pockets, so I assume that they are the highest evolved and the last to evolve, the most recent of all coins. But the fact is, none of this is real. This is just a big story being played out where assumptions dictate my tree and every branch is simple, yet it appears to have validity on the surface. In reality, it's obvious that pennies are more abundant because they are of the least value and are abundant in society, and that quarters are next because they are required by everything from parking meters, vending machines, toll, pay phones, and more. The fact is, the actual order of coins has nothing to do with my predictions, and if you look at the coins based on abundance found, it's actually pennies, quarters, and nickels, then dimes, not pennies and nickels, dimes, and quarters. Why? Because it's what people use the most often, not because of one being older than the other or where they came from. So my base premise and hypothesis of this theory is worthless, just like phylogeny is. My example is just one portrayal of how a tree is made. These evolutionists and Aron Ra are trying to strengthen their argument and prove there is validity in these phylogenetic trees by using a combination of nucleotide variation between species and individuals, also linking cladistic taxonomy and other things like physical similarities known as homology as well. But it's just ridiculous, and why it's failing so hard. These tree branches change all the time because inevitably somebody moves one to the next, over and back and forth. This just shows the retardation of the entire program he has designed. Now imagine if all the different fields of science actually had their input into helping build these trees. There would be a disaster. Let me give you an example of how much more of a mess it would be if all these branches of science took their part in building these phylogeny trees. Let's take, for example, the skunk and the human. Starting out, scientists would have to figure out where this creature fits in, so we began to look at its life. We have similar solitary lives until we find a mate, and so do skunks, so scientists would toss us into a related tree branch on the phylogenetic tree. But then, a geneticist comes along and notices that we are not related to skunks at all. Their chromosome count is 50, and humans is 46. So, they get pushed back off the branch. Then, along comes an anatomist, who notices that a skunk has body hair, and so do humans, so they get added back onto the branch. Then along comes a taxonomist, who removes the skunk again from the tree branch, because we are not in the order of Carnivora. We humans are hominids. Then along comes an ethologist, who notices that they are active year-round, and so are humans, so they get added back into the tree branch. Then along comes a zoologist, who notices that they have an anal scent gland, and that they use this as a defensive weapon, as where humans have no such thing, so they get removed from the tree branch again. Then along comes a statistician, who notices that they are found in most states, just like most people, so they get moved back into the branch. Then a kinesiologist notices body movement are not similar to ours, so they remove the skunk from the tree branch. Then along comes a homologist, who notices that they look the same as newborn babies, so they get moved back into the branch. Then along comes a pathologist, who notices that skunks can spread rabies, but humans can't do this, so they remove them from the tree branch. Then along comes a mammologist, who says, well, skunks are mammals and so are humans, so they get put back into the branch again. Then a linguist notices that skunks have only basic rudimentary communication skills and never produce language, so they get removed again from the tree branch. Then comes along an anthrozoologist, who notices that they don't go into hibernation, just like humans, so they get added back into the family tree branch. Do you see the trend now? Nonsense to its core. Every branch of science contradicts the other. Even the most up-to-date college books that exist today, which teach evolution, have failed miserably at this endeavor as well. Evolution 101 has 49 Tree of Life drawings in the book. Not a single tree, 0%, includes the name of a single common ancestor. Even the book Tree Thinking, an introduction into phylogeny biology, pushes the envelope even further, arguing that our knowledge of molecular process is not good enough to definitely rule out independent origins. So as a creationist, I would like to say thank you for being honest and open. This is another problem they have. All known molecular data from modern species will not be able to resolve relationships going back to a common ancestor. There is too much noise and not enough signal at the branch length. Phylogenetic trees at the extreme base of the tree are not resolvable, nor ever will be. If you ever see one represented, it is a total fabrication. The boundaries of information to code for the genes that are selected for are only found in subsequent generations. It cannot code for anything else that wasn't already there. Thus, the evolutionist must invoke mutations for all evolution from soup to man to occur. We know this is pure faith, with not a single observable study ever done or witnessed. Because no field of science can agree with one another to build an accurate phylogenetic tree, it proves they are pure fabrication and myth. They use an inferior method to build these phylogenetic trees in the first place. They used a program called PAUP, which has been written to determine evolutionary relationships. However, the program gave different results when you enter the data in different order. The answer was dependent on the order the data was entered into the computer. PAUP is still used to build trees really fast, but at least now they got called on their BS and they use another method now, but still use this PAUP system in order to build these early stages of their trees. That's not science at all. It's pure speculation topped with bias ideology from indoctrination. These are all lies. Aron Ra does not know the facts because he doesn't look through a microscope. He looks at lines on a paper from a book written and drawn by somebody else and focuses on trying to learn the animal kingdom, class, order, family, genius names of them all so that he sounds smart when he says them out loud to his audience. It all sounds spectacular and amazing and as though he's very intelligent. And I know why. You want to sound credible, and because we both know you're not a real scientist, you have to sound the part instead. But anybody can do this. I can talk over everyone's head as well, Aron, but does that help anybody? No, it's an ego trip. Doctors oftentimes do it to make themselves look a lot smarter so that the patient doesn't question what they're saying either. It's all just about perception for Aron, and when you break the surface, he knows nothing. Ask yourself honestly, why do biology textbooks define homology as similarity due to common ancestry, then claim that it's evidence for common ancestry? This is a circular argument, obviously. One thing stands out to me clearly, that everything about Aron Ra's phylogeny challenge is based on a fallacy. It begins with the presumption that everything has a common ancestor. Without that assumption, the rest falls apart. The Green Mile analogy is perfect. When they saw John Coffey with two dead girls and assumed his guilt without looking further into the crime, confirmation bias fueled by racism is why they didn't investigate. They jumped to the evidence that supported their preconceived notion and ignored the evidence that could be contrary to their claim. Your challenge is just another typical example, an attempt to classify us with a common ancestor and on all life, which supposedly evolved roughly 2 billion years ago. This ridiculous three-domain system has only existed as lines on papers, using lies mixed with truth as well, like all good lies do. It tells you that you are something which has multiple meanings, that you are an eukaryote, which by definition, organisms who have cells in the nucleus enclosed with the membranes, yet by accepting this basic definition of truth, you have also secretly admitted to being classified along with animals, fungi, and the slime kingdom as well. Why? Because they are also match that definition. So, you are related to cement, because it is also made of atoms, and so are you. That's the kind of rationale and logic Aron is trying to use. It's a circular reasoning argument. Like, all eukaryotes are of a common ancestor. Pine trees and elephants are eukaryotes. Therefore, pine trees and elephants are of a common ancestry. That's like saying, all men are bad. Gandhi and Tesla were men. Therefore, Gandhi and Tesla were bad men. So you see this reasoning? Fallacious, ridiculous. Or how about, all Christians believe in God, all Muslims believe in God. Therefore, all Christians are Muslims. Even according to molecular biologist W. Ford Doolittle from Stanford University, who states that they have failed to find a true tree, not because their methods are inadequate, but because the history of life cannot properly be represented as a tree. The dream of finding a molecular tree of life using cytochrome C or any other biological compound remains only as an elusive evolutionary dream. And at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, biologists compared 1,000 genomes. They found trying to build relations for phylogenetic trees is a waste of time because genetically there is not enough shared information between all life. I quote, "There are different ways to have a core set of instructions, but of the 1,000 genomes available, not a single protein is conserved across all genomes." So now, multiple studies have confirmed trying to build phylogenetic trees are a joke. So Aron, if your version of evolution is true, assuming humans are still evolving naturally and haven't taken complete control of their own evolution, then we should eventually expect to see, through a series of small changes in our population accumulating over millions and millions of years, a descendant species that no longer is recognizable as its parent species. Aron, you say that everything that can happen will happen, given enough time. That statement is logically incorrect, and actually factually incorrect as well, since we see such vast stasis in the fossil record. Out of all things Aron says in his videos, that one is a proven fake, false statement, regardless of one world's view. Evolutionists have to believe that if you start out with a particular species, a particular population, and give it millions of years, that population, depending on the environment and other factors, will eventually speciate so many times that it will eventually establish complete new populations that are no longer morphologically recognizable as the original species, like they have done with the whale evolutionary charts. They have to believe this, otherwise how could life first have evolved into the variety of all life that we see today? Thus, if you trace present-day man far enough into the future, eventually some human alive today will have a descendant who is morphologically vastly different from him or her today. This must have occurred in the past according to your theory, or else humans could not possibly have descended from whatever creatures they first emerged from your mythical primordial soup. And you have to at least potentially be able to witness it from this day forward, or else your theory is invalid. Your phylogenetic tree represents a proposal of how the process occurred in the past. Since we creationists deny that that process will occur as you believe it will in the future, we have no reason to accept or be bound by your proposal for how long it occurred in the past. Thus, your phylogenetic challenge is and always will remain a bogus challenge, which creationists can simply shrug off because it is not directly for us. It's for you, evolutionists. Yet, Aron makes the statement in his video, thus, there would never be a generation of evolutionary descendants that were completely unrecognizable as being related to or descended from their ancestors. Then how could the reverse ever be true, Aron? This is totally contradictory. How could there ever be a generation of evolutionary ancestors that were completely unrecognizable as being related to their descendants? Or do you honestly believe that a pine tree looks even remotely like a human being, since you are on record as claiming that humans and pine trees do share a common ancestor, right? Again, he says it another way as well, stating, there will always be a determinable relationship, just as there is between birds and dinosaurs, or between humans and apes. We have in no wise completely unrecognizable from them, and that was formally recognized by creation scientists even before anyone proposed evolution. So, where did pre-Darwin scientists, or anyone for that matter, recognize that birds were unrecognizable as dinosaurs? Citations needed, Aron. Come on. As for apes and humans, our similarities are about as much as they have in similar with body shape, like 2 legs and 2 arms. Hell, a raccoon's hand looks far more similar to a human's than theirs. Since his theory claims that my lineage traces all the way back to the first inhabitants of this mythological primordial soup, as does yours, and he admitted that evolutionists are unable to offer DNA proof that would identify my specific ancestors along the way back to this slime, then why is it real? Graciously giving Aron millions or even billions of years to his theory to demonstrate the validity of this claim that small changes in a population over time accumulate into a population of creatures that are radically different from the present-day population of which they descended. And now you tell me that you can't, because as you claim, thus there would be never a generation of evolutionary descendants that were completely unrecognizable as being related to or descended from their ancestors. Aron, I bear very, 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 very little resemblance to my single-celled prokaryote forebears, don't you? But you somehow believe that birds are dinosaurs and that humans are related to pine trees through a common ancestor, so your opinion as to whether A resembles B, comparative anatomy theory, is totally bunk. What I understand is that you have a hypothesis which says that dogs and humans share a common ancestor, as do humans and pine trees, and that you have acknowledged that your hypothesis cannot pass the genetic paternity test I have laid out before you because you cannot possibly obtain the DNA necessary to support your hypothesis. I further understand that you have said and acknowledged that humans a few 100 million years ago from now will not be recognizably different from present-day humans, yet you also claim in the same breath that present-day humans evolved from the same primordial population of creatures from which pine trees evolved, which was totally unrecognizable. I also understand that you apparently also believe in the contradictory belief at the same time that the creatures in your primordial soup slime bore a remarkable resemblance to present-day humans and to giraffes and to foxes and to whales and to trilobites and to dinosaurs. Lastly, I also understand that evolutionists like yourself have somehow managed to reconcile this sort of irrationality into your theory you believe to be coherent, which both does and doesn't lead to recognizably different creatures depending upon which way you proceed through the evolutionary timeline. Your theory has no rules and can explain everything, thus it is not a theory at all. It is a hypothesis that cannot even pass step 1 in logic or the honesty test. Regarding cladistics, there is no reason to assume that the nodes of the cladiograms represent punitive ancestors, and there is no direct lineages ever demonstrated. Cladistics doesn't demonstrate evolution. Cladistics is a classification scheme just like taxonomy is, nothing more. Just lies to swindle man into the animal family, and that all life is related to a common ancestor. Aron Ra, your phylogeny challenge has been answered, and the answer is it is not an actual scientifically valid challenge or a test at all, especially geared towards young Earth creationists or intelligent design. You have yet to demonstrate that a creationist orchard, lawn, tree, or whatever cannot be constructed without any reference whatsoever to your phylogenetic hypothesis. And in fact, I have proved to you that in the past, with independent, impartial collaboration in the form of the Berkeley EDU links that I have corrected you with, you are incorrect. Now, everyone knows that the phylogeny challenge is trash, and why it's trash. However, in my work, I pretend that it's not complete garbage, and I answer it in a variety of different ways. If you care about looking at the work, feel free to read through the book. If not, I don't really care. So Aron, your challenge is worthless for many reasons, but the number one being that you can violate the rules and everything you have drawn on paper cannot be proven, only alluded to. Here is a real challenge for you, and it is one that can actually be tested, repeated, observed, and you cannot even pass my stage 1 challenge on it. And I know this for a fact because I've had conversations with you in the past where you've dodged, ducked, and even deleted comments about it. Luckily, I can prove it. Below, under Show More, you can find the links to our book.
I've got my atheist badge. Let's do some good. As religious door knockers always travel in twos, I thought I'd drag along my director, Craig Melvin.
We follow the teachings of a man named Charles Darwin, who's an evolutionary biologist, and he brought an amazing message to the world. For example, did you know your relatives were monkeys? Did you know that when you die, your body just decomposes into the earth and nothing happens? There's no soul, there's no heaven, God is meaningless.